this point, we're just about ready to start rebuilding the workshop that was unfortunately lost in the fire. So I'm back here in the burnt out workshop. Not much has changed since we cleaned it up, besides a little bit of reinforcement here and there so it doesn't collapse on us. I'm really looking forward to getting back to the flow of things and the normal life. That'd be nice. One key thing is a lot of tools were lost in the fire. So I went through previously and dug out as many as I could find that seemed salvageable. One tool that I ended up losing was my very first tool. I made an iron, which is an itty bitty blade made from actual ore that I smelted with the good and basic eyes. Unfortunately, it was so small that I got lost in the rubble after the fire. I wasn't able to pick it out. So that's unfortunately gone. But to replace it, the guys at Good Basic, they actually offered to try and make me a new knife using some of that same iron bloom that we smelted from iron ore. But until then, I think one of the next really important steps is going to be trying to restore some of the tools that I've made myself in the series and get them back up and running, and so we can start producing some of our more normal content. Since we were doing these historically, starting from primitive, going to modern, we're actually a pretty good period for being able to recover them because most of our tools were iron or bronze. They're fireproof. Everything wood is gone and everything ceramic. It seems like about a 50% chance of surviving. However, they are covered now in rust and grime, and all the wooden handles have burned off. We'll be exploring a few different ways to try and clean these. Some that'll be historically accurate to some that use more modern techniques, and see how they compare and see what gets the best results. It would be really nice to salvage them so they can be used again. So let's get started and see if we can get at least some things back to normal. Let's move to somewhere a little warmer. First up, I'm gonna try a pretty simple method of boiling vinegar. And vinegar has been made pretty early in history, oftentimes probably by accident. We've made it a few times now just by letting some apple juice ferment, and eventually it turns into vinegar or acetic acid. And that acid is really good at dissolving rust. So I'm gonna try that first with the pole saw and see how well we can dissolve the rust on that by boiling it, a process called pickling of the steel. And it should allow the rust to just kind of scrape off, left with basically the raw steel. We just gotta recoat it and we should hopefully have a completely reusable iron tool then. Then I scraped off the charred wood on the handle with a knife and sanded it with a piece of pumice stone. While we work on restoring my tools, Joseph from the YouTube channel Good and Basic gets started using some of the iron they previously smelted to make a new replacement knife for the one that I lost.
In a previous video on how to make everything, we made this. This is bloom iron. But this isn't terribly useful. We need to transform this into something called wrought iron by squishing it under extremely high temperatures and folding it into a bar. And then it will be called a wrought iron. And wrought iron can be used to make something useful, ideally something good and basic like a knife. Let's get started. You don't have a monopoly on cold, Minnesota. Previously, when we made our piece of raw bloom iron, we did that with an ultra primitive setup where it was wood tongs and a stone anvil and a stone hammer. Today, we're upgrading. Also the tongs, that's a huge upgrade too. This is a Mora knife and it's one of my very favorite, and that is a really small but very practical blade. I think I can do this with the amount of bloom iron that we have. Something practical, something slightly Viking-y. That'll work. The hardest part of forge welding is getting it hot enough. I need to put these in to cook for a good long time and then squish those together into a big block, fold it a couple of times and turn it into a bar. That's the theory anyway.
Advancing past vinegar, a more modern solution is a highly engineered compound called evaporust. And it basically, as the name implies, evaporates the rust and allows it to just kind of fall off. So how exactly does evaporust work? It's basically magic. It doesn't damage the steel underneath it at all. The incredible part is it can be used over and over again, almost infinitely, not entirely, unlike vinegar, which eventually neutralizes in the process and then you gotta discard it. To kind of compare it, I have two different hammerheads that are all rusty. So let's try vinegar versus evaporust and see how well the results compare. Meanwhile, back in Utah.
That is mostly slag. However, there are iron bits in there. I'm going to fold that back on top of the other one and get it to come together. so far. We've literally pounded out some impurities. Wow! The stuff that was liquid was slag. What's left right there is mostly iron. I accidentally welded a piece of the bloom iron onto the spatula. And now I'm just going to weld them all on there. So now I have a fixed handle. That's looking pretty good. That's about how much iron we have. Basically a blade's worth. We'll see though. We've about doubled the thickness of this bar. Okay, let's see if it sticks together. Yeah, barely. I don't think we're going to get much further with this piece of bloom.
So after soaking the two hammerheads, the results are actually pretty comparable. And they still require a bit of manual labor to clean up and finalize. So I found the Evaporust and the vinegar to both be really effective for restoring some of the tools. So let's apply them to basically the rest of the tools we have. For the rest of the iron ones, let's use Evaporust, because that's basically what it's good for. It doesn't really work with other metals if they aren't iron-based. Then for the vinegar, we can use that because it is effective with copper or bronze tools, which we have a fair amount left over still. Soak them both in that overnight and see how well that works. So another little trick I tried out that works pretty well for amplifying both of these solutions, this tool called the ultrasonic cleaner. So this guy basically produces a high frequency noise that causes really rapid disturbances in the solution, which is kind of just creates really vigorous scrubbing action on basically anything you put in solution in here. So when you combine the ultrasonic cleaner with either of these solutions that kind of mostly just works on the surface level, this kind of actively peels it off and scrubs it off as it reacts. Most importantly, saving a lot of manual labor, brushing and scraping and sanding. But even then it's not perfect and it still leaves some stuff. So another method I found to kind of help clean up even further is a device called a Vibratory Tumbler. And basically you throw all the tools in there with a medium, basically scratch it up, and the whole thing just shakes for several hours. It kind of scrapes off the outer layer, and that's one of the most effective ways to just get an outside layer of whatever's on it off. All this cleanup makes a bit of a mess. Let's take a little break and clean up thanks to today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Dr. Squatch. They offer a wide variety of different soap products. They're all naturally made with no harsh chemicals. Very pleasant to use, and having made soap in a few different videos now, it's interesting to see actual ingredients that I know and understand. We got olive oil, coconut oil, shea butter, pretty straightforward. Let's see how it does. Smells incredible. Makes a nice lather, nice and sudsy. Clean, feel moisturized. They're so confident this is gonna be the best bar of soap you ever use. It has the money back guarantee. You spend more than 20 bucks, you get 20% off using our link in the description. Then back to forging that new knife. Now needing a little extra metal to add to the initial bloom iron.
This is bloom iron from a previous smelt that I've already gone ahead and turned into a bar. Let's see if we can't turn this into a decent knife. Under my hammer, this is resisting more than mild steel would, which makes me think the iron content is fairly high. That's good news for you. For a knife, you want a little bit of carbon so it'll hold an edge. I don't have a lot of iron, and I want a knife for me too. I'm gonna cut this in half. There we go. I'll take the smaller one for my knife. I'll turn this one into the How to Make Everything knife. Okay, first thing we're going to do is set up the tang by hitting it on the corner of the anvil to mark out our material. Next, we're going to start drawing that down to be a little longer and thinner. Okay, we're going to do that a couple more times.
In addition to the small knife, Joseph also decided to forge me a really useful bill hook knife. So I got most of the tools taken care of now, so now all that's left is all the pottery. Decent supply of the pottery ended up breaking just from the heat, but a surprising amount did survive. So I have pretty much all the ones I've been able to salvage here. A few of these did end up cracking just moving them, but I'm gonna try and salvage the ones that I can. We have things like the moratum, some of our jugs, oil containers, a variety of small vessels. All these really useful to have and a little bit difficult not having them. So one method I have tried so far is to clean it with vinegar, and had decent result with these. It works pretty good for parts that are glazed. So like the inside of this, which is glazed. Came pretty clean in the vinegar. Used the ultrasonic cleaner to save a little bit of scrubbing, and that worked fairly good also. But the porous outsides, if it's not fully glazed, it doesn't really get clean all the way. It's pretty hard to get it out because it's porous. So probably the most effective way to really clean these out and get them good as new is to just refire them. So at about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, the carbon just burns off. It's fairly low temperature, but there's still a decent chance if any of these are weakened, they could break. So this is probably gonna lose a few of them. Should be a pretty painless way to get them basically spotlessly clean. Now load up a kiln, do a load of that, see what it turns out. A few of these are gonna be a little too big for the kiln. I might have to manually wash them with vinegar and soap. So these seem to be the best methods. So let's give it a shot and see what results we can get. Items all nice and good. This one looks good. This thing is completely changed color. Looks pretty good. The bottle didn't make it. One failure, not too bad. Now just do the finishing touches on everything and get things wrapped up.
One interesting thing that's appearing as we are grinding down this blade is you can see the delaminations from my less than perfect welds. There's a pretty clear one here along this back edge. One way to see how much carbon is in a piece of steel like this is to make sparks with it. If the sparkers are mostly straight and kind of boring, then it's likely to be regular old iron. However, if the sparks are extremely fluffy, there's a decent chance that what you've got is high carbon steel. I'm not an expert, but I see at least a little bit of branching on those sparks. If I had to guess, I'd say that this is a low carbon steel. Alrighty, we're back at the forge and we've got the knives ground down. We're gonna reheat them and we're gonna quench them after they turn red. We want the whole blade to get up above what's called the Curie temperature, which is the point at which it stops being magnetic. Still magnetic here, not magnetic here. And that is a hopefully heat-treated billhook. With the quality of this iron, I have no idea whether or not it's good steel, so this may have done nothing, because if you quench mild steel or just raw iron, it doesn't really do anything. But since every smelt produces at least a little bit of carbon steel from all that contact with the charcoal, it should make for a slightly better knife. We're back at the forge. I'm going to try inserting that tang when it's hot into a block of wood, and that will make our handle. I think it's a pretty solid connection. A billhook like this really comes into its own when you're clearing small branches. Think of it as an English machete. You can just trim off the twigs like that. Handy tool.
Now to finish up my tools, with the now exposed raw iron, I need to protect it by first heating it and then giving a coat of beeswax. handles. I then used a mixture of olive oil and beeswax to provide a finish and protection to the handles.
This knife and this little brother of that knife are the very first functional objects I have ever forged from bloom iron that we smelted ourselves. You can buy a knife like this at the grocery store for a couple of dollars. Compare that to the Icelandic sagas, where occasionally the weregild for a person's life was paid with a knife. If you killed a member of my family, I could either try to seek revenge or I could demand that you pay the price of a human life. You might pay part of that fee in something like this. Iron was that valuable. It's a little bit crazy to me that this is so commonplace now. It's amazing, it's wonderful, it's beautiful to be able to see it a little differently, to understand what it's worth, and just how lucky I am to live in the future. Yeah, cool thing.
It took a bit of work and trying a variety of different methods, but at this point I've now managed to basically recover and salvage a pretty decent amount of the tools that were in the studio, the tools that I made myself. So it's been very satisfying to be able to recover them. Basically hit the undo button. So to remove all the rust from everything, refit everything with new wooden handles. Pottery, I found the vinegar boiling not quite as effective on the actual pottery itself. It seems like just the best solution is to fire them again at about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And got just all of these, used to be black, are now clean and are now usable. So I think this pretty much covers the base for all of the tools that I made that are now recovered. Adding to them now, we have the knives, thanks to Good and Basic, that are authentically made from actual iron ore that we smelted. These two knives, they were both very useful for prepping all the handles and getting them cleaned up. So be sure to check out their channel for other videos where they've done a variety of iron smelts. And we're currently working on trying to do another collaboration this summer where we try to unlock cast iron to actually melt iron and cast it. Spring is finally here and it's actually warm enough now that we can actually start the rebuild process of the workshop itself, and that'll really get us back to normal. Been a little bit of a pain to not have a full workshop. Right now I've already done some of the initial prep of tearing down some of the old structure. Hopefully should be getting started on actually rebuilding it pretty soon here. So thanks for bearing with us as we navigate this challenge. So thanks again for watching, and thanks again for everybody who's stuck with us and kept watching, and a special thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and check out other content we have covering a wide variety of topics. Also, if you've enjoyed these series, consider supporting us on Patreon. We are largely a fan-funded channel and depend on the support of our viewers in order to keep our series going. Thanks for watching.